we're starting a new beginning here. Parshat Devarim, book of words. And this is, it's a very interesting book, but I think it begs both a zoom in and a zoom out, because as we start a new book, we think about what it is, we think about what the book is. Devarim is the words, and the Mefarshim bring down that this is really a rebuke. This is Moshe's Musar to Bnei Yisrael. And the Sifri says, interesting that he says, I'll call Bnei Yisrael, Dafka, to say that everyone was there, so nobody would be able to have a refute against, any of the arguments that Moshe was bringing down. So you think about this, who's going to refute Moshe? There's an idea that we're starting off with already here from that vort, that there's potential for some kind of a judicial, legal kind of a discussion, which I think makes it interesting that the first thing that Moshe brings down in this week's Parsha is that he had to appoint judges. Moshe says, I wasn't able to look after all of you. This is something that I couldn't do all on my own. And this is why I had to appoint. I appointed Sarim, and for each counting, for each delegation. We did a practical thing in order for us to, one, understand our limitations. Right. He heard from his elders. This is the first Messiah epis in the Torah. Right. So he passed on ideas here that he said that we have to set up a system here to make this work. It's not going to work if it's just me. And I think that when you think about this, the first thing that Moshe is taking on as Masorah is that he's passing on, I can't do this alone. We're in this together. This is a national exercise that we're going through right now. And he starts off his Musar to the nation with this as the setting of the stage. That in order for us to function properly, we have to set up ourselves in a way that one person accepts their limitations and passes things on. Now, if you think about this also, he brings together everybody. What's super interesting about this is who he's talking to. So up until now, we've had Bnei Yisrael up until I think it was last week, we had everyone that was alive except for Kalev and Yehoshua were the people who sinned with the Meraglim. So perfect, it makes perfect sense, because the next thing he's going to talk about is the Meraglim. But you also have to take a step back. We zoom out for a second and think about who he's talking to now. He's talking to all of the up to 40-year-olds that have grown up in the desert in the lap of luxury with miracles abound, and they're about to enter an entirely different lifestyle. They're going to go from this miracle world to, I don't want to say it, having to take care of themselves. They're going to have to go through and shift their life from everything being handed to them on a silver platter to having to go and farm and set up life and do business, mekach, all the things that they're going to have to do. So Moshe's Masorah to them and Musar to them comes in the context of reframing the experiences of the past and giving them guidance for the future. And what's the first thing that he does right afterwards? He reframes the story of the spies. So there's you can do more of a comparison between the two of them, but the language of the description here where he says the story of the spies shifts. In some ways, he accuses the nation, not necessarily accuses, but he points his finger at the nation as saying, you guys asked for this, look what happened. But one of the clearest shifts in the segment here is he talks less about the facts on the ground and more about the feeling of the people. There's more of a feeling of fear. You guys did this from Pachad. You talked about how you were concerned about what the land was going to look like. You didn't want to go see it. You wanted to go and investigate it. Each shift in the language is a shift to understanding how practical things, the idea that we need to do recon before we go to war, can be motivated from a place of fear, and that's what led to this 40-year wandering in the desert that we're now on the precipice of ending. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago when we initially talked about Chet HaMeraglim, that there is potentially, we imagined a murmur, like that, that the Meraglim get up and they start talking about this thing, and it's not explicit. in this week's Parsha, Moshe makes it explicit. He calls out that the Terganu bo'alechem. You were in your tents and you were murmuring. And he calls out the fact that this was the shift. Sometimes a practical action can be motivated from the wrong place. It's motivated from fear. And I think that's where Moshe is making this big shift when he sends the Bnei Yisrael, this new cohort of Bnei Yisrael, into the land. He's giving them this guidance that practical things that come from the wrong place can send you into a place of trouble. The Parsha continues. We have some interesting little narratives here with the story of Esav. We have the story of Og Melech HaBashan. They have these fights, some fights that they should have, some fights that they shouldn't have. And it's kind of an idea that, we really have to trust in God as we're going through those things, where it's right for us to do those fights and where it's not right for us to do those fights. And maybe what's interesting also, when you think about Musar, what's the first thing? We have this idea that it's a rebuke, right? So we said that the Devarim are kinds of rebukes. We have also the other way we think about this is from Pirkei Avos. Moshe Kibel Torah, Umasra, and there's this idea of Masorah, this passing on of generations. So there's got to be something in the way that the Parsha is framed up as a way to give us some guidance. So think about who Moshe is. Moshe is a person who, at this point, he is at the close of his life. I think they say it's the last 4 weeks or 5 weeks of his life is all of Devarim, is all of his speeches, and he gives us a guidance on what it means to pass the torch. I work in my coaching with some of the people that I work with they're struggling with purpose, trying to figure out what are they supposed to do at this next phase of life. I want to do something different, trying to find some new idea. And Rabbi Sachs brings down many different ways to think about this, to kind of think about what a person does at that stage in life. They can be working on doing new things for themselves. But one of the most amazing things that a person can do is pass something on to the next generation. They start to shift their mindset to giving something over. And one of the most important things there is also the reframing of those things in the past, this idea of shifting the language. And I think there's a very interesting narrative, because this week's Parsha also coincides with Shabbat Chazon, which is the Parsha that leads into Tisha B'Av. So if you glance at the Haftorah, it's also a story about something very similar, about this idea of challenge, of taking action in a different way, but it almost becomes the opposite bookend. Here in the Parsha, Bnei Yisrael are at the precipice of entering the land. In the Haftorah, from what I understand in the context, it's about them on the precipice of losing the land. They're in there and they're failing to live up to their requirements. And I think it's Yeshaya, they bring down that he's there. That what are they considered challenged for the most? It's for the fact that they're bringing empty korbanos. I mean, there's more that's described in there, but they're going through the motions without their pnimios, without their intention being aligned with what they should be doing. And the Parsha, the Haftorah brings down a very interesting language at the end there, and it says that God did not abandon them. He could have left them entirely destroyed, like Sodom and Amorah, but he didn't. And then later in the Haftorah, it brings down that even if you sin, even if your sins are like red or scarlet, there's different lashonos, they can be whitened like snow or like cotton. So this idea that there is always a path to repentance. I mean, if you think about a phrase here that kind of stands out to me, God is kind of saying, there's nothing you can do to fully push me away. I understand that you can do something wrong. I'm still here for you if you're ready to show up again for me. And it's really this covenant that goes on beyond generations that Moshe is really passing on for people. And there's a very interesting little idea that maybe in the language passes through all of these things also. If you think about Moshe's language when he says, I appointed judges, he says, Echa, and then a sentence about how will I be able to do this alone? And then you look in the Torah again at the end, and it also says, Echa I don't remember the exact pasuk, but the same language is brought down. How will I be able to continue? And that it becomes the Megillah that we'll read on Tisha B'av, also of Eicha, of sadness, of remembering the past, but also reflecting on that as a memory of us maybe operating from the wrong place, not bringing our pneumius to the right place to live up to our potential, and hopefully that should be a way for us to accept the Musar and pivot it in a way that we can proceed better for the next phase. Azai.